right, looks like we're live. Welcome everyone. We have a great virtual event today. We have a great guest, Jonathan Weinzapfel. He is a candidate for the Indiana Attorney General. And of course, we have Stan Albaugh, who is a state Senate candidate for District 24. Welcome, guys. I appreciate your time today. My name is Joe Walsh. I'm a candidate here for Hendricks County Commissioner, and I'm going to be emceeing this event. And we're going to let Jonathan get started. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your campaign.
Well, Joe, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Stan, we had a chance to talk earlier this week. Looking forward to this conversation this afternoon. My name's Jonathan Weinzapfel. I'm from Evansville, Indiana. I actually grew up on a farm in Posey County. With regard to my professional political experience, I've had the opportunity to serve 5 years in the state legislature, representing Posey County and Western Vanderburgh County. Served 2 terms as mayor of the city of Evansville. Decided not to run for a 3rd term, went back to practicing law for a while, and then had the opportunity to serve as the chancellor of the Ivy Tech Evansville campus. And then I left Ivy Tech in order to go back into private practice and to run for AG. I still live in Evansville. My wife, Patricia, and I have 3 kids. All 3 are in college, but they've been home with us ever since they came back from spring break. So it's been an interesting summer for us. And of course, like many families throughout the state, we're curious about what this fall semester at college looks like. And whether college students or K through 12, I know every family with kids are just kind of on edge trying to figure out what's going to take place this fall semester.
Awesome. Thanks, Stan. I'll give you a few minutes to let you introduce yourself. We all know you, but we'll let you get your 2 cents in there as well.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you doing this again this week. And Jonathan, I certainly appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we can get the word out around the district. As most folks know, my name is Stan Albaugh. I'm a candidate for the Indiana Senate in District 24. The principal planks of my platform center around education, jobs, social injustice, and healthcare. So there's plenty of things for us to talk about. But before we start into that, once again, I want to share the results of the polling that we did in June, in case you haven't heard. We ran a poll in June, and it was run by the Indiana Democratic Senate Caucus. And the caucus has officially determined the district to be a purple district and to be flippable. So what we need to do is make sure that everybody's registered to vote, where we get out there. When you hear that thing, that I thought I was the only Democrat here, that's absolutely not the case. Make sure your friends are registered to vote, make sure we have a good turnout, and making sure that we're adequately represented at the polls. And with that, Joe, we can go ahead.
All right, we'll get started. We'll start this first one with Jonathan. So we are currently seeing in Indiana pushing to overturn the ACA. I know that the current Attorney General is looking at doing that. How would you work to protect Hoosiers' health care, especially during a pandemic?
Well, frankly, the efforts through the courts to try to find the ACA unconstitutional are flat out just unconscionable. I can't imagine why the Attorney General, why the Trump administration would be looking to take away health care from literally tens of millions of people throughout this country. It's a travesty. My opponent, Todd Rokita, was in Congress, first elected in 2010, and he brags about voting more than 60 times to destroy the ACA without having any type of replacement to follow it up. And then, of course, he also supports Curtis Hill's lawsuit to find the ACA unconstitutional. So what does that really mean for Hoosiers? Well, under the ACA, for the first time, when it was passed in 2010, Hoosiers were protected from discrimination with regard to their health care and applying for health insurance. The health insurance companies could no longer discriminate or provide different rates or different terms based on someone's pre-existing condition. So that if you had high blood pressure, diabetes, they couldn't treat you differently than any other individual. That was huge progress. In addition, it provided significant monies to help expand Medicaid to cover more Americans. In Indiana, the Pence then Governor Pence administration expanded the HIP 2.0 program, initially created under Mitch Daniels, to eventually cover almost another 550,000 Hoosiers through Medicaid. And then, of course, it also set up exchanges so that people could buy affordable insurance at competitive rates. And there are another 120,000 Hoosiers who have received health care through that means. So in essence, if this lawsuit is successful, and you can bet Todd Rokita is going to push it every step of the way, there are hundreds of thousands of Hoosiers who are going to lose health care, and 2.7 million Hoosiers who are going to find that their health care is in jeopardy. Because if they have a pre-existing condition, if they have tested positive for coronavirus, they are going to have a difficult time finding insurance. But it is beyond me that they would be pursuing this policy, this initiative, at this point in time with the global pandemic, when frankly, Hoosiers and all Americans are concerned about their health insurance and how they're going to be able to provide for their families.
Good answer. Looks like you've thought quite a bit about that. Stan, same question for you, but yours will be put in a different direction, of course, because you're running for the legislature. So we're currently seeing in Indiana, we're pushing to overturn the ACA. How would you work to protect Hoosiers' health care, especially during a pandemic?
Well, great answer, Jonathan, and I agree with you across the board. The concern associated with pre-existing conditions is very, very real. As some people know or may know, my oldest daughter suffers from lupus, and actually here 3 days ago was recently exposed to COVID because she's a nurse working and stuff in a hospital. Those issues are real and they're alive, and we don't know the full impact associated with somebody that has been diagnosed with COVID. I would think that we need to move towards the ACA has been great for, as a HIP 2.0, has actually insured a lot of Hoosiers and protects a lot of them. We need to continue to move that direction. We should be moving to insure more people, not less, not trying to put people out so that they become financially insolvent as a result of health bills associated with COVID or any other disease. So I would want to move legislation to protect that and to actually enhance that so that we can ensure more, especially vulnerable and pre-existing conditions or people that actually need that help and assistance. And when I say I move more towards a central payer, I think that's the direction that the country is going overall. I think Indiana should help lead that direction. And that's what I would think moving forward.
Awesome. All right, Jonathan, next question. How would you work to protect LGBTQ plus employees who work for religious schools?
Well, this is somewhat of a complicated issue. Before we went live, we were chatting about this very thing. The Supreme Court had a decision just in the last couple of weeks, which really expanded, how do I say this, the right of religious employers, frankly, to discriminate just about in any way they want, at least discriminate on religious principles. So frankly, folks the employer in these cases are largely protected under federal law, at least as interpreted by the Supreme Court. I would think that the answer for those who are interested in making sure that anyone who receives tax money is also protecting the civil rights of all their employees would be to make sure that anyone who receives a state voucher for educational purposes has to follow consistent guidelines as far as non-discrimination and following the Indiana civil rights law. Now, of course, Indiana civil rights law does not include LGBTQ. So really, it seems to me it's probably a two-step process for the legislature. One, to provide those protections for gays and lesbians, and second, to make sure that anyone who receives state money has to adhere to state civil rights law.
All right, Stan, how would you work to protect LGBTQ plus employees who work for religious schools?
Well, as Jonathan said, we were talking about this issue beforehand, and we're in complete agreement on exactly that. The first step being to put the LGBTQ community in that category so that they can be protected under the legislation. And then absolutely 100%, nobody should be paying tax dollars to any organization that turns around and uses those tax dollars to discriminate against them. That makes absolutely no sense. Tax dollars are supposed to be used for the public good and in the public interest. I understand the decision associated by the Supreme Court. I think that personally, I think that is a stretch, but I'm not an attorney. But if that's the law of the land, but I think that we can pass legislation that ensures that that is passed equitably across the board, so that if they're getting a voucher or receiving that tax money, then that would be a requirement and stuff associated with it. And if they want to forego that tax money, then obviously the Supreme Court decision would be something that they would choose to follow in lieu of. But it's kind of an either or, not a, well, they get that protection and they get my tax money. Because I want my tax money to be for fair and equitable treatment, not for the ability for someone to choose for whatever determination, be it religious or others, in order to discriminate.
So we got a question that was asked on the feed. How will you, either candidate, we'll start with Jonathan, work to expand the Indiana hate crime legislation that was extremely watered down before? Is there anything that an attorney general could do?
Well, besides, obviously it would take an act of the legislature to actually specify and specifically include gays and lesbians in hate crimes legislation. I thought it was a cop out what they did. I don't know what the fear is of specifically including gays and lesbians with regard to hate crimes. I don't get it. But it will take an act of the legislature, and as Attorney General, that is something I would be an advocate for and would support legislative efforts, especially when Stan takes this up in January. I'll be right there supporting him.
Stan, just for you as well, real quick, what would you do to help improve hate crime legislation that was extremely watered down?
Well, certainly resubmit legislation that was like what was similarly submitted on comprehensive legislation to cover all those groups so that they're specified. I know that the right likes to talk about, well, if you specify all the groups, then none of the groups, but and they'd like to talk about, well, the judge has the opportunity to upgrade that for as a hate crime. But the problem with those type things is when you have systemic racism that's built into the system, none of that occurs. And there's a reason that we have some of those problems and stuff in the state, like what just recently happened down in Bloomington. We need to take a proactive approach to that in Indiana. Unfortunately, we have a very bad history with it, and I understand some of the resistance across the board, but we need to name those and call it what it is, and we need to legislate that appropriately, and that's the only way we're going to get real, true change in the state.
All right.
So Joe, I would just add, I think it's incredibly important for this state through its legislature to, even if it's symbolic, to make a statement that, targeting people and committing acts of violence or criminality against individuals because of their race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, it's flat out wrong. It's flat out wrong. And really, that's the value here of this hate crimes law is really just make, and even if it's symbolic, but to make a statement saying this is unacceptable in the state of Indiana, and we just need to do it.
You're right. I agree 100% with you. We just got to start actually putting where our values are instead of just keep pushing them off to the side and actually show what our true values are. So that's a good segue. So, John, what are your priorities as a candidate for Indiana Attorney General?
Wow. Well, there's, when I got into this race, I thought I'd be running against Curtis Hill and talking about the ACA, which we talked about earlier in this segment, and really talking about his ethical transgressions with regard to sexual assault of 4 women in a bar. What has transpired since is a global pandemic, the death of George Floyd, 2 huge events which really have just kind of consumed the public. I mean, these are the issues that are at the forefront of our society. Especially looking at the global pandemic. I mean, it really has turned our economy and our society on its head. People are concerned about their jobs. We have roughly about 12% unemployment in the state. People are concerned about losing their health care. They're concerned about their kids going to school and can they do so safely? Are they going to learn anything? There are folks who have to put a loved one in a nursing home, and do they have the facts about what is going on in those facilities? Are they safe? Or maybe they put a life savings into a family business and now they're seeing it just slip away because of the social distancing requirements. I mean, there's a lot of issues of concern, and frankly, I think that's what is at the forefront of people's minds. So as we talk about the issues like the Affordable Care Act and protecting healthcare, it's doing it in the context of the struggles and challenges that Hoosiers across the state are facing, largely through this global pandemic. So when I talk about my priorities, and maybe a better way to say this is what are the first things you're going to do upon taking office? Well, the first thing is to pull Indiana out of this lawsuit to find the ACA unconstitutional. Hard stop, first thing we do. A couple other things that we need to tackle right away, and we'll probably get to this a little bit later, but the state of Indiana, along with local communities in Indiana and communities in other states throughout this country, have filed a lawsuit against opioid manufacturers and distributors, looking to hold them accountable for their negligence and the way that they have pushed these drugs on individuals and communities. And my goal is hopefully we will see some type of settlement coming out of this litigation, and that any of the proceeds are dedicated to individuals and communities that have been harmed the most by the opioid epidemic. And I think that means putting more money into drug treatment and drug counseling, and mental health treatment and mental health services. So again, really directing those proceeds towards those individuals who have been hurt the most. Probably the third thing is really taking a look at protecting workers' wages and the conditions within their workplace. One of the things that we see is that there are a lot in the construction industry, at least, there are a lot of contractors who are not, who are treating their employees as independent contractors, as 1099s. What that means is that they are not paying their employees appropriate wages. They are not paying taxes associated with those, and it's creating an unfair and uncompetitive advantage for them. So one of the things I want to do is make sure that we are making sure that employees are treated appropriately under the law, and again, looking at places of employment to make sure they're safe for workers, especially with the coronavirus. And perfect example is that Tyson food plant up in Logansport, where oh my God, they were just it was just a huge just a huge outbreak of the coronavirus right in that facility, and literally hundreds of employees got sick. Several deaths, I'm sure, but just had a profound impact. And employees should be able to count on working in a safe environment. So those are really the three things that I want to try to tackle on day one.
Awesome. Stan, for you, what are your priorities as a candidate for the Indiana State Senate?
Well, I also have a comprehensive list. Since education is my central plank of my platform, I want to fix the education funding formula for paying school teachers. The idea that in the last 10 years, we have slipped to 51st in the nation and keeping up with inflation is just ridiculous. The number of problems and things that we're having. I personally see education, that training has a significant impact to our economy, because what happens is the economy is currently in a transition, obviously, from manufacturing after World War II and then global manufacturing after 1978, when China opened their doors, and now we're transitioning to a knowledge-based economy. Globally, we are 17th in the world, we're 34th in the United States. We need to fix that. Having a good, qualified, educated workforce is what attracts businesses coming in. Companies like Salesforce and InfoSystems are two of them that do happen to have offices here, or InfoSystems is in the process of building an office here. They have difficulty. They cannot find all the qualified, trained employees that they want, and we need to attract more of those. Education is what will attract those type of businesses as we transition to a knowledge-based economy. Experts tell you that by 2025, more than 2/3 of all the jobs are going to require advanced skills training and/or college degree for those jobs. That's 2/3 of the economy. Those are all necessary jobs, and those are all good, high-paying jobs. So I think it starts with the education to be able to attract that and to fix the economy. The next item is obviously what we've talked about, has to do with the hate crime legislation. We absolutely need to fix that, because that is also something that stops some of the other companies from moving to Indiana, because they have concerns associated with that for their employees. So hate crime legislation is certainly there. Also, increasing the minimum wage. The idea that anybody thinks that $15 an hour is a livable wage is just ridiculous. They need to get out a calculator and figure out that $15 an hour equates to $30,000 a year. That tells me in order to meet the median household income of $60,000 a year, both parents have to work full-time, and who's taking care of the children and running the household? How does that exactly work? I'm not saying that one of them has to stay home, but there certainly needs to be some accommodation. We need to do something about raising the median household income in Indiana. We are almost 10,000 below the national median. All that has a direct impact on our tax base, so that we have money to do some of the other things necessary. So those are probably the priorities. And another thing, moving down to healthcare, there's one other thing that's near and dear to me. I have another family member that severe pain associated with having multiple back surgeries. I absolutely think we need to move forward with things like the medical marijuana. There's 33 states across the country have legalized medical marijuana. There is no reason for us not to be able to do that. There's a lot of evidence associated with that to be able to help with the opioid addiction problem, and to be able to manage some of the issues that some people are currently taking opioids for. And so I think that would be a good first step.
Joe, if I may, I think Stan hit the nail on the head, especially with regard to education. As a former chancellor at Ivy Tech, I have had a great opportunity to learn a lot about higher education, and especially how it interacts with our K through 12 public school system. One of the things I think it would be of great value would be to and this is actually based on an initiative that we started in Evansville while I was chancellor, and that is really to set the expectation that every young person graduating from high school earns some type of post-secondary credential. So it could be an associate's degree, their first year of college, which is the would be 30 credits, or it could be a certificate in welding, technology, a certified nursing assistant. But we have to set the expectation that every kid graduating from high school either leaves with a head start on college because they've gotten a bunch of credits under their belt, or they have a nationally recognized credential that is of value in the workplace. I think that would really go a long way to putting kids, young people on a path of success. In addition, this is shifting gears just a little bit, but I had a conversation with Jennifer McCormick earlier this week. And one of the things we talked about is the charter schools. And charter schools, I think, are here to stay. But one of the challenges is we have to make sure that they're living under the same rules as the public school system. One of the things that irritates me, and I, again, find it unbelievable that with the virtual schools that cheated Indiana taxpayers out of roughly about $68 million by inflating enrollment, getting payments, and lying to the state and lying to every Hoosier. Since that became news, I really haven't seen much happen with it. It would be the role of the Attorney General to investigate, recover the money, and refer for criminal charges if appropriate. So that is something I'm committed to doing. Jennifer, it was interesting. She talked about that there may be actually more to the story, in that charter schools are also eligible to borrow money from the state for construction purposes. And she has encountered situations where charter schools come into Indiana, say they're going to set up a school. They borrow a bunch of money from the state. They can't find the students that make it worthwhile, and then they leave. The problem is they're leaving with the money that they borrowed, and no one is trying to get that back for taxpayers in the state. Again, that's just wrong. I can't imagine. Us fiscal conservatives really believe that any cheating of the state, we have to be aggressive in recovering that money and prosecuting to the fullest extent possible.
And Joe, I couldn't agree with what Jonathan said more. We're in complete agreement. The idea that tax dollars going to a charter school or a private school, they absolutely need to meet sunshine laws. I understand FERPA and what that does, but some of the interpretations associated with that protection under the law, so that religious schools actually receive voucher money, and we don't know where it goes, how it's spent, or what it's doing. The requirement associated with that, anybody that receives tax dollars, we should be able to track that money through the system. They should also be required to meet the same standards across the board, the same Title IX and Title I and Title II, the testing requirements across the board. I think that actually some of the testing needs to be discontinued and delinked in the public school system. But the idea those requirements ought to match. In theory, those charter schools are supposed to be public schools, but when the legislation allows somebody to start a charter school and hire for-profit contractors on the back side, so they set it up, they pay themselves an exorbitant salary, and then they have their own LLC set up to provide everything from custodial services to library services. They use the charter schools nothing more than a filter to take our tax dollars and filter it right straight through to their own company to make a fortune off of it, as opposed to provide a good quality education to those students. We need to make sure that they're meeting the same requirements under the law, and that it's being monitored and checked so that we know what's happening to our tax dollars.
Awesome. All right. So Jonathan, so you ran for a legislative seat. You defeated a Republican and Republican district. What advice do you have for candidates in a similar position today, like Stan?
Well, I've run in quite a few races. Believe it or not, I was a young punk kid at the age of 30 when I ran for Congress in 1996 against an incumbent Republican. Came within about 1.5%. And of course, I did everything I could to win that race. But as I look back after, oh gosh, what was that, 24 years ago already? I really actually kind of think I was lucky not to win it, because it led to a path of the legislature and serving as mayor, just to some great experiences where I think I made a big difference. But having lost that congressional race, it was a nice segue into the legislature. What's funny is that the congressman's brother ran against me twice when I was in the legislature, and of course beat him 2 times. I then ran for mayor against an incumbent Republican mayor and won, and then was reelected in 2007 with 85% of the vote. I don't know if there's any secret, but just trust people, treat them with respect. I think, for example, I think people have appreciated Governor Holcomb's presentation on and how he has presented the state, and maybe not necessarily disagree with all the steps he's taken, but be transparent, right? In dealing with the coronavirus, this is what's at stake. These are the challenges. You got to treat people like adults, and you can't hide issues from them. You just have to be upfront. And I've learned the hard way on some of this stuff, especially as mayor. But just be upfront with people, treat them with respect. Have several issues that are meaningful to you, and make sure people know what you stand for and what you want to achieve.
So Stan, with him saying that, what have you been doing in your campaign in a very known as a Republican district, which is now appearing to be a purple district? what are some things or advice you have for other candidates that are running right now for some of the success that you're finding on the campaign trail?
Well, I agree with Jonathan, and I think the same old thing is as many people as you can get out in front of, or as much voter contact as you can have. People need to hear from you, and they need to hear from you more than once, more than just when you're asking for their vote for the first time. I mean, they want to get to know you. They want some level of comfort. They want a feeling, I believe, for what kind of person you are and how you're going, what kind of decisions you're going to make and stuff under pressure. Now, with that being said, as you know, I'm a retired Air Force colonel with 30 years of active duty service, and I've never been elected to anything. And so I'm very new at this and learning as I go. Been doing the best that I can with COVID, where we were actively canvassing last fall and this spring. And now we're doing as much literature drops so that we can protect people from COVID, and taking it to their front door and following up with a text message and then a phone call with the opportunity to discuss and to talk to the voters. The one thing that I do find that probably the most that I wish people would not do is just rely on what they think of as what's going to be a wave elections or those sort of things. I don't believe wave elections actually occur. I think what happens is hard work is what happens, and people that work hard at it, reach out to the voters, make as much voter contact, make your case. The times that I've been able to do that and talk to the voters, even though they might, they tell me that they're conservative, they also tell me that I'm going to get their vote. They're because of the information that I've been able to portray to them on a personal level. So getting out and as much voter contact as possible. And in the days of COVID, unfortunately, a lot of that probably is a lot of time on the phone.
Joe, one of the things that Stan said that really kind of struck me and reminded me of some of my experiences is how important it is just to listen to people. One of the best thing I did as mayor was start what we called a traveling city hall program, where once a month, myself and my department heads would go to a different ward within the city and just be there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Anyone who wanted to come and sit down with me or one of my department heads, we could have a conversation about any issue of concern to them. And actually, it was an idea that I got from former Governor Joe Kernan, who in his experiences as mayor of South Bend really talked about the importance of what he called his mayor's night in, night out program. Again, providing access to people so that anybody in this state can come and have a conversation and share their thoughts and concerns. And, in my experience, people don't necessarily expect you to be able to fix all their problems, but you better listen to them. They expect you to listen, and that's your duty as an elected official or as a candidate. Listen to folks, treat them with respect, and somehow you learn something from everybody you encounter, and being able to take their experiences, their thoughts, their concerns, and somehow roll it into a larger agenda or helps personify some of the stuff that you want to do. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be there to listen to people and build those relationships that Stan talked about.
Awesome. So, Jonathan, after the murder of George Floyd, what does criminal justice reform look like to you?
Well, there are, in a way, two different issues. There's criminal justice reform, and then I guess what I would describe probably as law enforcement reform. Criminal justice reform, I think, in large part, involves what I would like to try to do with the opioid settlement proceeds, in making sure that we are funding drug treatment and mental health counseling and treatment, really the underlying causes of huge increase in jail population. Boy, if we can take care of our drug and mental health issues, we're going to go a long way to reducing our incarceration rate. I think what goes along with that is that there are only 2/3 of the counties in the state have some type of drug court, which provides an alternative sentencing process. And so instead of, someone gets in trouble with, violates the law with regard to drug possession or usage, let's find a way to get them treatment instead of simply just convicting them and sending them to jail or prison. So I think every county ought to have some type of drug court that's operational. In addition, Stan mentioned this earlier, but it seems to me it's long past time that we decriminalize marijuana possession. I like what Ryan Mears is doing, the prosecutor in Marion County, who publicly has said, look, it doesn't make sense for us to be prosecuting low-level possession cases. I fully support that and see that it ought to be expanded statewide. So really, that's dealing with our criminal justice system, and we need to keep, really, in my mind, 3 tenets at the front of our mind. One, we want to make sure we're keeping individuals and their communities safe. So we have to protect Hoosiers. The second is, I think we ought to be looking at initiatives to help reduce the need to build more jails. I've traveled throughout the state, and I mean, there are dozens of counties that are looking to spend tens of millions of dollars to build more jail beds and cells. We have to do a better job of limiting incarceration for nonviolent crimes. And third, I think we need to improve our criminal justice system so it really does reflect the humanity in all of us and in each of us, and we need to keep that at the forefront. With regard to what has come out of the initiative or ideas that have come out of George Floyd's murder, the Black Legislative Caucus has a nice list of initiatives that I think ought to receive every consideration. It seems to me, for example, that chokehold should be abolished here in the state of Indiana. In my experience as mayor of Evansville, one of the important things that needs to happen is that police officers and the FOP have to be involved in these discussions. But really, change will really take place when the FOP is as concerned about non-performing or bad police officers as the community as a whole. What we have seen is that historically, the FOP has sometimes protected some of those individuals, and it doesn't serve anyone's interest to keep non-performing or poor performing cops on the street, because they simply make every police officer, every person in blue look bad and with a bad reputation, because everyone's going to see this one bad apple and they're going to treat every police officer that way. We can't allow that to happen or continue to happen. And so there have to be some creative solutions working with the FOP to figure out how, let's get rid of the bad apples. That will go a long way, both for the reputation of police officers and of course, making sure that we're keeping our public safe.
You as well, Stan. So after the murder of George Floyd, what does criminal justice reform look like to you?
Well, Jonathan, first off, I really appreciate your answer. I learned something listening to you because I have historically conflated those issues into one. And I agree with you completely, the need to separate them, and they probably are. Criminal justice reform is absolutely different than law enforcement reform. I obviously agree on the criminal justice side on the things associated with minor drug charges. It makes absolutely no sense. I don't believe that possession in and of itself or even usage should be a crime that sends somebody to prison. I think it should be something that sends somebody to rehab so that they can fix their life and go forward with that. The idea that, for example, at the border, I'm not sure what the cost is at our institutions in Indiana, but at the border, we're paying private companies $750 a day to incarcerate those children, which is just ridiculous. That'll more than pay for somebody to be in rehab, anywhere near those types of fees. On the other side, on the law enforcement reform, I absolutely agree. I know that some police officers feel like the chokehold should be an option in the case for somebody when they're scuffling to be able to defend themselves.
I
personally,
would agree with that.
But I personally, I would tell people that I used to do a little competitive fighting when I was younger. You know when the person that you're fighting, when they have stopped resisting and when their body has given up. So the idea to keep that hold on until the point of killing somebody is a crime. There's no doubt about it. You know it when you do it. And how do I know? Because I have choked people before and taught some of those types of classes. So should it be legal? I don't. I can see both arguments, but I think probably not, certainly the way that it's been applied. There's too many examples associated, like with Eric Gardner, that sort of thing. That is an individual of a smaller man looking at a bigger man and intimidated and afraid of what's going to happen. And so he overreacts when it's necessary. When you look at George Floyd, I don't know how many of you can get up off the ground, but I can't get up off the ground with my arms handcuffed behind my back. There's absolutely no need for three people to be on him with their knee on him, and certainly with one on his neck. That is absolutely a crime in commission. And I think that law enforcement officers, they swore a duty to serve and protect, and they should stop every crime they see in commission, even when that crime is being committed by a bad law enforcement officer. So those other officers, in my mind, had a duty to interject themselves into that situation to save George Floyd's life. Absolutely no doubt about it. And I don't care. I'm not saying George Floyd was an angel or a perfect in the rest of his life, but what he was being arrested for, what he did not justify deadly force. That was absolutely a crime. And so I think legislation is necessary to make them responsible, so that when if they see another officer in the commission of a crime, they should do something about it. They should be required to do something about it, not idly stand by and watch it happen. And so I think legislation is absolutely necessary along those lines. I absolutely agree with Jonathan when he said that it's going to take that type of information. It's going to take a lot of work with FOP, and there's no doubt that their involvement is necessary. But so is the community in which they serve, because we pay them to protect and serve and for the function that they do, and to have those few bad apples that represent, I mean, they're the ones that stick out of the barrel that everybody sees, because that, unfortunately, we have a tendency when people are doing a great job, we don't always recognize that they're doing a great job. But boy, when they are doing something wrong, like what happened to George Floyd, everybody sees it and it's terrible, and we need to do something to eliminate it. And I don't like the idea that police are being labeled as all bad guys, because they're clearly not. I come from a family of police officers, my father for some time and my uncle. But what I saw on that video was absolutely a bad police officer, and those other three officers should have physically removed him off of that man to let him up, because that was excessive.
Stan, you mentioned some of you have family members in law enforcement, and as do I. I have two first cousins in law enforcement. One is a retired police officer from Terre Haute, and the other is actually active as a sheriff's deputy in Warwick County. And to hear the stories of the things they have to go through, it's a tough job. I mean, especially when every person you approach on the street, you have to approach them as if they are armed and dangerous. And it's a scary thing, serving as a police officer. One of the things that one of my cousins always emphasizes is the importance of training. And, for example, with George Floyd, the police officer who had him on his stomach, kneeling on his neck, I mean, obviously completely inappropriate. But how you're taught is you don't put that person on his stomach. You should be on his side, and that prevents something like that from happening. So I guess the point is we can't emphasize enough the importance of training for all police officers on an ongoing basis. Everything from appropriate de-escalation techniques, the importance of understanding diversity, to how to handle someone who becomes violent or physical. And so there are a lot of changes that can and should take place. And hopefully hopefully what the positive thing that comes out of George Floyd's murder is that we can have a constructive conversation and actually see some real results. You've seen this community, the entire country really kind of galvanized around the idea that, there's an understanding that, that not everything is going well. There are some steps we can take to, again, respect the humanity and everyone and create a fairer and just system.
The only thing that concerns me is that everything can't hinge just on the training, because no amount of training takes somebody's racial bias out of them. And what I believe that what I was observing was racially motivated, because I can't imagine too much reason for him to stay on that man's neck for 9 minutes, 3 minutes after he had no pulse. I can only come up with one conclusion why an individual would do that. And that's not a training issue, that's a bias issue. And that needs to be dealt with in a legal fashion when somebody is going to act against the best interest of the community.
Absolutely.
So to build off of this, as Attorney General, what would you be able to do to address recidivism rates and rehabilitation within the prison system?
Well, I think this really kind of dovetails with an earlier point I made about the importance of dealing with drug addiction, mental health issues among the community, and of course among the jail and prison populations. I can't emphasize that enough. Another is to make sure that we're creating opportunities for individuals when they leave the jail or prison system. At Ivy Tech, one of the things that we were trying to do with in Branchville, the state prison there in Perry County, was trying to make sure that we're establishing some training programs in manufacturing, and especially the way the job market was this time last year. Employers were having a difficult time finding anyone with some skills for some basic manufacturing jobs that frankly paid decent, would provide a decent career opportunity, and really make sure that when people leave jail or prison, they're not going back into the same situation that they left, that they have a job, that they have a home to live in. Those are important first steps. And if we can give them the training within the prison or jail situation, I think that will go a long way to reducing recidivism. Make sure that they have an opportunity to do something different and go to a different place than the place they were in when they were incarcerated.
Same thing for you, Stan. As a state senator, how would you propose addressing recidivism rates and rehabilitation within the prison and jail system?
I agree with Jonathan 100%. I do recognize that not everybody can be reformed. Some people may actually choose a life of crime deliberately because they just do. But I also recognize that the current system that we have evolved into with the privatization of everything has made the situation worse, because there are a lot of people that are there because of the socioeconomic system in which they grew up, which they were born, in which they grew up. And sometimes that was just the only way to try and support yourself or to make a living. Training and to do something about the recidivism rate and training and stuff in prisons is necessary so that we don't have that repeat offender. And privatizing the prisons is kind of counterproductive, because since we have done that, because of the cost associated with it, because of that private company trying to make a profit, and oh, by the way, if they reduce the recidivism rate, then what happens? Their business model goes down. So they do things that are kind of counterproductive to the goals of society to help those people actually reform their life and do something going forward. I am just not a fan of private prisons, people making a profit off of that, so that things sometimes happen that benefit the private prisons and don't benefit the public at large, to include the people that are incarcerated for various crimes, depending on what it is. I am under the belief that somebody that may go into prison for the first time may be due to a mistake, and they've not necessarily chosen that as a way of life. But the things that they learn and the things that happen while they're in prison certainly adds to it, and they are a lot more accomplished and or better at it if that's the life that they choose going forward by the time that they're released. Most of my information or background and stuff on this, my father in the 50s actually worked at the prison in Ohio State. He was a guard there, and that was his, as he started into law enforcement, and he did that for a few years. And some of the things that I used to hear growing up just sound like real travesties. And I realized that was a long time ago, but now we privatized, and so we monetized it now, where a company actually benefits from people in prison not fixing their life and not doing well and not doing the right thing. And I know how effective capitalism can be as a motivator, but that is motivating against what I believe to be in the best interest of our society.
So, as you know, right now, there's a lot of discussion throughout the state on how we are going to open up schools, what that's even going to look like. I know from my poor son, he was very distraught this week because they will not be having a marching band season. And it's his senior year, and I feel really bad for the poor guy. But as Attorney General, what are some things that you would be able to do to help this situations? Maybe if you have parents who are fearful of their students going to school, of teachers even dealing with some issues if they do come down with COVID. I mean, is there something that an Attorney General could do to help in this process?
Probably not directly, but I think it would be important. One role that I could play is making sure that teachers understand what the law allows. The federal government has, with Congress, in providing some of the relief and assistance that they have over the last couple of months, have really set some new guidelines for employees who contract coronavirus and test positive. As far as not being able to be fired, that they're having 10 days of employment, that the kind of mandatory leave, paid leave. So that would want to make sure that teachers understand what their rights and responsibilities are. And maybe as much as anything, we just got to be, as a community, we have to be protective of our schools. And Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation, just yesterday, the superintendent announced that there was going to be a 2-week delay in the start of school. And he's begging people in the Evansville area in Vandenberg County to social distance, to wear masks. If we can't get the spread under control, our kids aren't going to be able to go back to school. And that will be a huge travesty to our families, to our communities, to society. I mean, just think if we're gonna set some of these kids back a full year academically because they have been unable to go to school, they've been unable to access the internet at home. I mean, we're sentencing these kids to a tough life, and I think it's our community's responsibility to make some sacrifices and wear a mask in public, social distance if you when you can, and just be very cognizant of how your actions impact others in this community, because we have to get this coronavirus under control if we want our schools to open up and continue this fall.
Stan, for you, with everything going on with all of the scares of children going back to school and concerns of parents, what do you think you could do as a state senator to help them along in this process?
Before I answer that, I want to ask Jonathan a quick question based on something that he just said, because him being a lawyer, he's more informed on some of the things on the law. You talked about employer-employee relations associated with the virus. Can the employer force a school teacher to sign a non-liability waiver like they're requiring all the students to do going back to Brownsburg School Corporation? Jonathan?
Well, I'm going to beg off giving legal advice over Zoom.
Well, I didn't mean that as a legal advice question. I was just kind of following up on what you had said on those rules.
I wasn't. That's the first I've heard that a school corporation is requiring families to forego any type of lawsuit or basically saying that they have no liability should a student contract coronavirus. It's the first I've heard of a school corporation doing that.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean that to be a trap, but as the question came in, it wasn't one that you and I had. I mean, I didn't know until you said something that piqued my interest, because Brownsburg is starting on time. Brownsburg School Corporation is starting on time, and they're requesting students to sign release of liability waivers associated with COVID. And now I live in Avon, not in the Brownsburg School Corporation, but Joe lives in the Brownsburg School Corporation. I personally would not sign that, because now I'm letting the school off the hook for any requirements associated with masks or social distancing or cleaning, or they're negligent, but I've signed a release of liability waiver, so now I have no recourse based upon their negligence. I would not subject my child to that. And nor would I subject my family or my wife or the members of my family that have compromised autoimmune diseases. So to me, that would be an issue. What I think we should do is I think we should, in regards to going back to school, I know for a lot of people, it is an issue, but so are deaths in your family. I think that we need to do something and get the COVID virus under control before school becomes the primary concern. I think maybe we end up with some innovations associated with school after this virus, where it may generate that. Maybe why do we only do school 180 days a year? Why do we have summers off? Why don't we do year-round schools? Some states and locations do different things. There's other ways that can be made up on the backside that doesn't cause 140,000 people to lose their lives. I am also afraid that, and I know that the decisions are made at the local level, but I've had or heard some conversations. I have some concerns associated with the people that are making those decisions associated with funding levels. For example, they have to be in school 100% in order to get the full ADM for the school funding formula. But if they do online, okay, I think last year towards the end of the school year, they were paid the ADM rate for the school, but when your online schools are paid at 70%. So how does that funding then affect that? And I would hate for the lives of those children and their family members to be a monetary decision versus a healthcare decision and what's in the best interest for our country, the citizens. I understand how traumatic it might be to some of my grandchildren that are in high school, and I've got 3 that are actually going to be seniors this year, and they're kind of like, they're a little bit disappointed with how things are going. I'm sorry, but I still don't want you to come home and kill your grandma because of school. So can it be done online, or can other accommodations be made, or whatever type of innovation and things are available associated with it? Can it be made up over time as we have vaccines or able to implement, or if we would actually use masks as a society, maybe have a nationwide mandate and practice social distancing so that we can actually flatten the curve similar to Europe, or so that Canada will now let us go in and out of Canada again because our numbers are so high. I think we were, yesterday we hit another record at over 77,000 new cases. It's not a testing function, it is an infection function. So we need to do something about that. And I'm concerned about a lot of the decisions being made with schools and the motivation. I hope it's not based on funding. And was very disappointed when I heard the decision associated with the release of liability waivers. And so, Joe, I'm going to push that question to you, since your children go to Brownsburg with that information on that release of liability.
You know, you're not supposed to ask the guy asking questions. You know, that's not how the game works. No, there are concerns. We'll have to definitely look at how it goes. My son, again, is in marching band, and there is a liability waiver you have to sign to go in this extracurricular activity, which is marching band. And it's an interesting concept to put in there. And again, I do understand that teachers and administrators are sitting there saying, well, it's just this, it's just that, but it still comes down to brass tacks, being that it is what it says it is. It's a liability waiver. They can't, people, just because you're 6 feet away and you're outside doesn't mean that you can't catch it. And I think that's what a lot of concern should be. It should also look at the football season. We do love football here in Indiana. And what's going to happen you're not going to have a line that's 6 feet apart. You can't put the linemen 6 feet apart, but so they're going to have to sign a waiver as well. And it's not fair to families that get put in a situation where it's either you sign the waiver or your kid doesn't play. And so that's kind of where the concern is coming up right now.
So is it only for the activities, not for classroom?
My understanding is for activities. I'm sure when I get home, if I get that wrong, my wife will let me know very quickly about that one, that I got that one wrong. But no, I do know that one. It is for activities right now. But I know there is concerns, and we were just talking about it. How much time off will a teacher get? There's going to be more concerns about. On top is how are you going to find enough substitutes? Are they going to have to sign liability waivers to come in and be a substitute? If the teacher's sick for 14 days, who's going to teach the children? There's so much to this, and we have no answers to it. And it's absolutely, it's just crazy how we're just barreling towards this. And down where you're at, Jonathan, they're kind of tapping the brakes a little bit. But up here in Hendricks County, we haven't seen any brake tappage yet. They're just going full bore to the end of the month. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I do know that IHSAA today did release say that children do not have to be in school in order to participate in activities. But I know down here where I live at, they have not done anything with that yet. So, but now I'm asking the questions here, and I'm going to ask one more question, and it's going to be the toughest question. So we can't do county fairs. We can't have any fun this year. No, we're having lots of fun. We can't go out and do things that we normally do. What is the fair food that you miss the most on the campaign trail? Jonathan, you can go first.
Oh, just about anything deep fried, I think. You get that at the county fair, right? Oh, I love a good tenderloin sandwich. So that's probably the thing I'll miss the most.
You're a man after my own heart. Stan and I were just having that discussion. He's like, "What are we talking about?" I was like, "Tenderloin." Like, there's nothing more Hoosier than a breaded tenderloin sandwich. I just had one before I came to this event. I went down to a local restaurant and ordered one through the drive-thru. So, what about you, Stan? What's your favorite fair food, if you have one, that you're going to miss?
Well, that's the Hendricks County Rib Fest. The ribs.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. We hit our hard wall here. It's time for shameless plug time. So like if I had one, it'd be joeforhendricks.com. That's Joe, the number 4, Hendricks.com for my running for county commissioner. I'm not going to say that. But Jonathan, what's your shameless plug? What's your website? What's your Facebook, Twitter? Let us have it.
Weinzapfel for AG.com. Now, I know my name's up on the screen, but it's the name is spelled like it sounds, believe it or not. It's WEINZAPFEL, Weinzapfel for AG.com.
Stan, what's your shameless plug? Let's hear it.
My shameless plug is at stanalbaugh.com. Continuous all the way through. I've got links on there for you to check your voter registration or to make an ACLU donation if you're interested. Also, I certainly would we do plenty of postings and information on our Facebook posting, which is Stan Albaugh for Indiana Senate.
Remember, guys, if you're watching this and you made it to the end, I ask one simple thing. If you're on Facebook, hit the share button. Likes are nice, but shares is what builds momentum. And hey, yes, we know that people like Joe Biden and all of them are doing very well for themselves fundraising, but it does take dollars for these guys to win. And I know both of you are doing very well in fundraising, but the machine is going to get scared very soon when they start looking at these numbers and they're going to start pumping some dollars in the state. So if you can, even if it's $5, both these guys could really use your support. But that's all I got today. I really appreciate your guys' time, and I hope that you guys have a great campaign, and we'll all see what happens in November. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.